now we're finally to the end of Volume 1, The Odyssey, with Chapter 20 entitled Honeymoon. So let's talk about this song, and this will be my last video for a while. Um, so, Honeymoon was literally the first thing that I started recording. Um, I had basically the iPhone recording demo that I came up with while I was, essentially writing the lyrics, you know, sitting in my room just jamming one day, and this came up, this song just, yeah, basically almost wrote itself. It was something like I came up with it in, I don't know, 15 minutes or something like that. Um, and it's not a complicated song at all. It's probably the easiest to play on the entire album. I mean, it's like the verses are like D minor, A minor, or A minor, D minor, something like that. Um, Progression. That's it. The choruses are, I want to say, E major seventh to a D major seventh or something like that. That sounds about right. Um, and that's, I don't know, 80% of the song right there. Um, where, I guess it becomes more interesting is, the different levels, or layers, I suppose. Um, and, variations with guitar left and guitar right, doing different things or whatever, to, at least try to keep it interesting. Um, yeah, it's an easy song, but to me, this song is a good example that even something easy and simple and somewhat minimalistic can still be, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be effective, I suppose. In my opinion, this is one of the most effective songs on the entire album. Um, but yes, it was literally the first thing I recorded, or at least started recording, like in January or so of 2017. Um, I can say that the the like beginning guitar riff, this heavily saturated reverb guitar, yeah, that was like the original take, the first take sort of thing. I never got rid of it. It was literally the first thing that I ever recorded using Studio One. So, like, fun little fact with that was, I was trying to record, and um, I had like a metronome count off, like 4 bars or something like that to, get ready, as it was counting off. And I started playing the riff like a quarter to maybe like half a second, um, before it like actually started recording. So there's like a tiny little snippet at the very beginning that was completely cut off from that guitar, and I kind of dragged it, a little bit, or made some room for it, so to speak. But honestly, I did try once to re-record that guitar, and it's just something about the like re-recording of it, like it just didn't sound right to me. The tone sounded off. It I couldn't get the right tone that somehow I got in that initial first recording. And so yeah, that's the reason why I kept it. Um, but even still, this was like pretty much the first song that I completely finished, even though it's the last song. But it was easy. It was just kind of came down to, hey, this is a song I can sort of cut my teeth on when it comes to, the recording process itself, and sort of get used to this software, because I had never used Studio One before, and was used to Soundforge, Sonar, whatever it was called, and so I wanted to just do something that was simple and easy to just kind of get the hang of it. So yeah, that's basically the story of at least the music. Um, so when we get into the like lyrical meaning of this song, um, like I've explained, I guess the last two chapters, it's still in front of this firing squad. He's still basically prophesying that he's got the Holy Spirit on him, sort of thing, and he's telling the people who were gathered, what's up. Um, but I think, I, like I've said, the last two chapters, like three different groups, and one each song could be interchangeable for who he's kind of referencing, or aiming it towards, you know. But honestly, I think that this song is mainly aimed at Aurora, the church, the bride. Um, and perhaps, like I've said, there's three different groups, but kind of a fourth one being himself, if you want to count himself as being part of this, even though like he's the one that is facing down the barrel of the gun. But that still means that he's kind of a fourth group, if you want to call it that. So I don't see any reason why not. This could also include him. Um, that it's like the voice of God speaking through him, but also to himself. I mean, why not? Um, but yes, it's mainly him aiming this towards Aurora, and so the idea of honeymoon is that it's a play on the idea that Jesus, the church, the wedding, all that stuff has already happened. Like, I recognize that theologically, the wedding feast of the lamb, or whatever you want to call it, hasn't happened temporally yet, at least from our temporal perspective. You could make some sort of metaphysical argument that in eternity everything's already happened, um, but that's just hearsay. Um, I think from a human perspective, from what we glean, scripturally speaking, yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but taking some artistic license, it's coming from the standpoint of Jesus speaking these words and speaking it to his bride as if they are already married. But being that, this is temporal, this is on earth sort of thing, the whole idea of the song is, you know, the honeymoon is it's over, the love is fizzled out, but not from his end. I mean, if God is love, Jesus is God, then that cannot fizzle out because it's not part of his character, his nature, his very being. Um, but from the bride standpoint, and it is um, possible, I guess. So that's the idea of this song is that you know he's basically saying, hey, the honeymoon never ended. I never stopped loving you. Um, that sort of thing. So, like for example, um, okay, like the first verse sings, "I built a garden, expelled you only from rejecting me from your heart after you ate from the tree." So the whole Genesis kind of account. Um, but I restored the landscape for you to dine with me. You accepted the invitation only to expel me from my creation. Um, so, like in my mind, uh, um, I mean, this is like the first verse is kind of the entire summation of, well, the Bible. Um, this idea of creation, the fall, restoration, all that. I mean, from Genesis to Revelation, that's pretty much a short summation of what's going on. Um, but like in my mind, the whole you accepted the invitation only to expel me from my creation almost has like I for some reason I have like the parable of the what's it called, the parable of the 10 virgins, is it the I can't remember the exact like title, but the whole lamp thing going on, that Jesus tells in the Gospels. That's kind of, I don't know, it's just me, um, but I sort of have that imagery in those lines, I suppose. And I mean, lyrically speaking, it has nothing to do with that, but that's just kind of where my mind wanders. But the first chorus, bridge, whatever you would want to call it, says, "Under a trellis we wed in a potter's field, carried it to my chamber, a tabernacle prepared." Um, and okay, so the idea, and this goes back to two things I can cite. One being, which I think I already cited this early on, but Rob Bell's book Sex God, and he specifically has a chapter in it talking about the Jewish. It looks like it's spelled out chupa, but from what uh, I recognize it, it's pronounced hoopah. And so basically, this hoopah is, for the lack of a better term, like a trellis. Um, I mean, how many weddings have you or I been to where, basically the bride and groom come and stand under like a arching canopy sort of thing? That's kind of the same thing. Um, it would be like made out of wood in ancient times and even now among, say, Orthodox Jews. Um, but like what would happen after the wedding ceremony is, think of it as like the groomsmen or whoever would pick up the hoopah by the base and carry it to like the bridal chamber, and it would basically be put um, like over the bed or whatever. So I mean, like even um, you'll see like really nice antique beds or whatever that sort of have that like arching thing or something kind of like hanging above it, and to me it's like, yeah, this goes back to this Jewish hoopah thing. And you know, the idea was, okay, the bride and groom will go into the bed chamber, they'll consummate, the dude will throw out basically the bloody rag to, you know, show that, hey, she was a virgin. And then the like party can actually begin, because like the idea was that the consummation was actually the wedding ceremony itself, kind of thing, is from what um, you know, I've been taught with that stuff. But anyway, the idea, and what was so interesting to me was that um, the hoopah is supposed to be like a microcosm, an example for the tabernacle in like the Old Testament. And so like the tabernacle is supposed to literally like represent this spiritual union, this marriage between God and like the entire nation of Israel. And so that's pretty much what that is referring to right there, like under a trellis, like, oh, if I put a hoopah in there, like nobody's gonna know what I'm talking about. But like, oh, kind of anglicize it into you know, a trellis, a wedding trellis. It's, I mean, it's the same thing, right? It symbolically is supposed to be the same thing. It's just that most of us being Anglo-European, whatever, and not having like a Judaic background, like we just think it's some like ornamentation that looks really pretty with flowers, kind of thing, you know, that'll, oh, maybe this like trellis, like if it's a really nice one, will cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and it, but you know, it's going to make this a really special day, without realizing that there's like actual spiritual symbolism with it. um, and like a sidebar, but with this whole thing, I thought it was like, so I, years and years ago, I used to listen to this podcast called the Moth Podcast, and it's an amazing podcast of like storytellers, just all kinds of different people basically doing like an open mic sort of thing in like New York City. And there was this one episode of it that I listened to, that it was this like Jewish dude and talking about like how, anyway, to stay on point, I basically learned from this podcast that um like the tradition with the hoopah is that when a boy, like after a boy is circumcised, you know, as like a baby, the father would take the foreskin and plant it underneath a tree. He would pick the tree or whatever, and then once the boy grew up, became an adult, and was ready to you know, like get married, the father would go cut down, you know, a couple of branches, and they would make it the hoopah out of that very tree that he buried the foreskin. And so like this guy was explaining that, and how it's, you know, has to have it it's symbolic, that yes, you chop part of the weenie off, so to speak, but you know, it's like you lose something, but like gain something too once. Yeah, I just thought that was like super interesting, and it's a sidebar, but um, I mean, I see the symbolism there of okay, in a sense, well, Jesus kind of circumcised his very life by being hung on a wooden cross, and because of that, um, his church grows. He gains a bride. You know. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with that particular chorus. Um, so like the whole idea of like her love growing stale or whatever kind of comes into play in the second verse that says, all would know that you're mine by your love for one another. Going back to scripture with that line. But after the honeymoon, you thought of civic duty, wash dishes, rear children, preach on your love. Um, and so, I mean, like, oftentimes in like the church world, we do a lot of the things that we do mainly out of this like ethical obligation or civic duty, so to speak. And it just, I mean, we all do it pretty much. Like, I'm guilty of it, like, all the time. Um, but I guess I see through the BS at the same time of my own hypocrisy and how, I mean, sometimes I have to admit, like, civic duty may be like all I feel like I can give sometimes, but I also recognize the problem with that, that it is just civic duty and not done out of like gratefulness or heart filled with love or whatever. Um, but anyway, excuse me. But it ends by saying, but you never came home, never drank wine or broke bread. So once again, going back towards a reference of Eucharist or communion. But as I've had people point out to me before, that the word communion basically um, is kind of a smash up of the words common union. Um, and so like that's what I'm trying to say there, is that like Jesus essentially saying like you never actually had real communion after that point. You just civic duty, works, whatever you want to call it. Um, so then there's like the third verse, for example, where it says, um, okay, so like I referenced Les Miserables. Okay, if you told me that I was gonna like write a song, let's say 10 years ago, write a song that was going to make like a direct reference to Les Miserables, and like I would have probably laughed at you. I would have been like, why the hell would I do that? Like, isn't that some like stupid like I'm a tough dude, like I'm a hardcore dude, like a windmill kick you in the face sort of thing. Um, but the fact of the matter is, like when they did the movie version of Les Mis, gosh, how long has that been? Like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a chance. Like, I've got nothing better to do on a Friday night or Saturday night sort of thing. And I went and saw it in theaters, and like, man, that hit hard. Um, Amazing, amazing movie. You know, I know it's a novel and whatnot originally, and I can't say I've read it, but just seeing that movie, I mean, it's powerful. And as like a musical, I mean, the songs are solid for what they are. Um, like Anne Hathaway, even though she's really only in like one scene, so to speak, one song, I mean, that freaking just like punched me in the heart, like pulled all the strings, like her, everything about that was just perfect and tragic and sad, even though just, I mean, that was like in the first 15 minutes of the movie or whatever, but like, I guess, um, like her character is like the mother, and I mean, she's what, like basically a prostitute sort of thing, ties in with all this. Um, so yeah, mentioning Les Mis, and then like I'd say, yeah, went to the street and cackled mockery as David danced a fool. Um, so I mean, like that referencing his wife and the whole like getting the ark back and all that stuff. You know, is what I was referencing there. Um, and it says, "You lamented in Arias how you long for adoration, yet sold yourself at street lamps as Hosea wept and watched your bastards." All right, gonna go into a pretty good tangent here on uh, the book of Hosea and Gomer, because that's obviously what I'm referring to at the end of that verse. Um, and I know like some people out there would potentially get offended that I basically wrote this like worship song and put the word bastards in there. Yeah, I kind of mean that literally. And if if you've actually read the book of Hosea, you should be able to like understand why I would choose that word in there. But for this like tangent, this like me soapbox preaching or whatever, um, this is something that kind of grinds my gears because the book of Hosea is a fascinating book in the Old Testament, like absolutely fascinating. Um, I've heard a lot of people, you know, reference it over the years. There was a Third Day song, an amazing song called Gomer's Song that's pretty much written from the perspective of Hosea in it, and it's very kind of tender and loving song and yada yada yada. Um, I mean, an amazing song, but there's just one problem. Um, so I remember at a church I was part of like a decade ago, um, the pastor in one of his sermons made reference to the book of Hosea. And I mean, it really was just referential, just kind of said in passing in the middle of his sermon. But he specifically said and pointed out that Um, the book of Hosea is a love story where, you know, she goes out and, you know, becomes a prostitute again and breaks Hosea's heart. But at the end, she returns to him, even though she's old and kind of emotionally broken and, you know, all this stuff. And he takes her back and loves her again and yada, yada, yada. And I remember a while back seeing like a painting like this fairly like realistic, and I mean that like realism, like in, you know, art, um painting, visual arts, um, as like a style. Um, this realistic painting of this like Middle Eastern man carrying this woman down, a village street sort of thing, you know, and it was, obviously titled Hosea and Gomer or something like that, and really beautiful, well done painting and stuff like that. That tends to be the narrative that Hosea is pointed as. The problem is it never actually says that she returns to him. Like, I'm sorry, it is not there. It's not. There's two two reasons I think you can come to that that would lead anybody to that conclusion. And personally, me myself, I do think that she did return to him, but I have to admit I don't know because it never actually says it. The book of Hosea is essentially broke up. I mean, if you want to go by, some sort of like hermeneutics book of, the summation breakdown of the entire book of Hosea, you know, they'll have at least like 12 sections or something to it. But really, it's kind of broke up into the first two chapters are, the actual narrative, like historical, this is what happened. And then the remaining, uh, like chapter 3 through, I can't remember exactly how many chapters, it's not that long, like maybe another 7 chapters, if that. Um, yeah, it's just prophecy. That's it. That's pretty much the book of Hosea right there. And the first 2 chapters, um, pretty much shows, hey, God tells him, marry this prostitute. Hosea agrees. They have like 3 children, and then she returns to, the streets to be a prostitute again. And that's basically the end of chapter 2, and everything from there is prophecy. Um, so yeah, it doesn't say that she returns to him. Only 2 reasons why you could come to that conclusion is A, because of some commentary, whether it be like semi modern commentary or whether you go back to Jewish commentary, from, ancient rabbis who said, yeah, the tradition says that she returned to him and yada, yada, yada. Or you could come to the conclusion that she returns to him based on the overall context of the prophecies themselves. So, like, most of the book of Hosea is pretty difficult not to like read as like this guy being heartbroken at the very least, jaded or whatever, but you know, more towards like the human aspect of it. You know, if I were Hosea, I would be completely pissed off, like really pissed off. And so, I mean, yeah, the prophecies are, prophecies against basically Israel. Okay. But you get to like the final 2 chapters and it changes tone of like, despite you basically being a hoe bag, Israel, hey, I'm going to love you anyway and I'm going to redeem you anyway. And so, based on those like last chapter or two, contextually speaking, it's plausible. But yeah, I can't stress enough. It does not say that she returns to him. It just doesn't. Um, so like I just have to point that out. But also, And what may be actually more important than Gomer's character are the three children. Um, and hence why I use the word bastards. Um, so part of the prophecies in like the second chapter of Hosea is it, or I guess it's the second chapter. I can't remember exactly, but they have three children. Like the first, I can't remember any of their names offhand. I'm actually Lo Ruhama was one of them. I can say that with certainty. Um, but basically, like uh, the three kids' names that they had. I know, like the first one didn't seem that big to me, but apparently it's kind of a reference to this like valley in Israel where a bunch of like wars and battles took place, and it was kind of like hinting towards war or something. But like the second and third child, you know, God tells Hosea, name them whatever this name, Lo Ruhama. Pretty sure that was one of the two. Um, but it kind of like points this out in the like prophecies that like the first of the two, the name actually means, um, you know, you're not my people and I'm not your God. And like the second one, I think it maybe vice versa, but the second one like literally means unloved. Um, so like we call God our Father, and He's saying, "Yeah, not your, I'm not your God, and you're not my people." So saying, "Oh, and watched your bastards." Can you see? Like, if I have to explain that further, then like I'm sorry. Please go back to school. Like that may be rude, but I don't care. Like you know, that's why I chose the word bastards, because I mean, you put yourself in Hosea's shoes. Like, dude probably didn't even know whether he was the real dad or not. He just had to like assume that he was, because hey, she's his wife and stuff like that. So, you know, naming them these like messed up names, you know, part of me wonders if that like actually pushed her away. If that was a way of like showing us that hey, if you just like give people like messed up judgment, it's just going to push them away. And maybe that's what happened with Gomer, is that like, oh, he named my daughter unloved. Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to like doing dudes on the street for money. Why not? You know, maybe that's just the way I think or view things, but part of me wonders. But either way, that's that's like a big part of that story. And luckily by the end of the book, it does turn it around so that like Hosea is told by God to like change their names and all. Um, Changes their names to like the negation of those negative things. So, like for instance, unloved becomes loved, and you know the other one like being, oh, I'm not your God, you're not my people, becomes I am your God and you are my people. So, like, I know that's like a complete sidebar, but like to me that context is extremely important for like the heart of what this song is trying to say. Um, and so like the, I guess, third chorus or whatever is simply saying, "Oh my darling, when are you coming home? And yeah, the ending part, me screaming and stuff, is just I build a garden with a trellis and spotless bed and yada yada yada. It's just um, a lot of the same stuff kind of being repeated, but ending with "Won't you dine with me?" and just asking rhetorically, will you come home? Will you have a meal with me? Will you get past, like, yeah, the honeymoon ended, so to speak, but not really. Um, so that's this whole song, and that's the ending of the album. And so there is no like clear resolution at the end. He ends saying these words, thinking, they're going to be my last words, and cut to credits. Like, if you want to know like what happened to the protagonist, whether he like got shot or ran away, or like Aurora came and kissed him on the lips, like, sorry, you're not going to get that, at least in this volume. It's That's how it ends. Um, so when it comes to personal meaning for me, um, I could not, and like at this point in my life, I don't even give a damn if this pisses off like certain people, um, whether like old friends of mine, or whether like if this got back to her and she got pissed off. Like, I don't even care. Like, this is reality. Um, I could not have written this song if it wasn't for the woman that I wanted to marry. Like I've said before, like, I didn't want this stuff to be like autobiographical, to say, oh, this is like 100% about her. Because when I like originally wrote this song, it's about the bride, it's about the church, all that stuff. But from day one, I was like, yeah, I would not be able to write this song now, or back then 5 years ago or whatever, if it wasn't for her. I couldn't get in that headspace. Um, I couldn't write from that perspective. It would just be like theory at that point. But like once she came into my life, and things went the way they did with her, um, up until that time, and late 2016 when I actually wrote these lyrics, yeah, I couldn't have written them, if it wasn't for her, even though it's technically not about her. But once I got to actually recording the vocals, especially for this song, um, you see, one Christmas a couple of years before, maybe it was like a year or two before, um, I hadn't known her. We hadn't been like friends, but for a couple of months at that point. But I already knew, you know, um, and that don't need to go into all the reasons why or any of that. But I knew. So I wanted to do something nice for her for Christmas that year, and being a painter and everything, I just decided, well, I'll do a portrait painting for her, which is exactly what I did. I had it given to like her family since I knew them, and as far as I know, like she opened it on like Christmas Day or something like that in front of her entire family. Um, anyway, of course, I took like a picture and stuff of the the painting that I did for her, and had it saved on my phone. And once things got like really bad with her, like straight up, I used the picture from the painting, the portrait, as my wallpaper on my phone. Um, it's like this. I think of it as like I read a Henry Newen book in college that one of my professors had me read that was about like Russian iconography. And, I wasn't interested in it really. It was like, okay, like knowing history, like iconoclasms and stuff like that, and, graven images and this whole like early Puritan sort of whatever. Um, you use the word icon in it, and like Christianity has this like negative connotation. But what Henry Newen was explaining was that these icons, like in Moscow or wherever it was, it's been a long time since I've read the book, but he was explaining that like these are supposed to be visual aids for meditation and prayer, something to focus on, to get like your brain in the and heart, I suppose, in the right framework. And like reading that, I was like, oh, that makes sense, um, especially like being a visual person as an artist and whatnot. Like it made complete sense to me. And it was kind of the same thing in having this painting as like my wallpaper. Is it was like a visual reminder of like how I felt about her and stuff like that. So when when I was recording this song, I wanted to get in that same headspace. Like I can't stress enough, like this song is not about her. Um, but to get in that headspace of, okay, I'm I wrote this song from Jesus' perspective, talking about the bride. Um, you know, when I recorded the vocals for this song, like she, she and I were not on speaking terms whatsoever. It was after like my mentor had passed away. Like times were dark. Um, and so I remember like setting up um, one night in that like open space that I mentioned before, where it was like, um, like this empty floor in an office building sort of thing. Um, and by that point, I think everything had already been demolished and cleaned up. So it was just like an empty floor with like a desk sitting in the middle of it. So I, set up or whatever. Had my mic and all that like ready. Um, and I remember I broke out my phone at the time, like hit play, and I'm like doing the playback in my earphones and um, listening to the music and really emotionally wanting to get into that place. And so I pulled up the picture of my phone of her, um, the painting and all that, and just like focused on it like it was an icon or something, um, to get into the emotional space. Because like I've said before, when you record vocals and you're just trying to get the perfect take, like it may sound emotional, but like in the moment you're just trying to press, diaphragm. You're trying to get as much volume or as little volume as possible. You're trying to get especially in like metal vocals, you're trying to like compress everything, push everything out that you can so that it doesn't sound like shit. And so there's not really any emotionality to it whatsoever. But I looked at the picture and then it started rolling. And I remember just screaming at the freaking top of my lungs the final sections of "Oh my love, when will you return?" and all that, just screaming freaking my face off or whatever, um, and like really pushing like my volume, just giving it all I've got, sort of thing. And I got to the end, my beloved, and just like I think my voice crackled, and that was it. And then, won't you dine with me, kind of thing. Um, like literally, the I think that was like that take. Like I think I used a borrowed microphone from like the old church that wasn't a. I mean, it was a decent enough like stage mic, but wasn't like a recording mic. But I kept that recording with like that old mic because of like the emotional nature. Like I sang that like final two lines of "Won't you dine with me?" like after I just like screamed my freaking face off. Like I was like done, like me like just done. Like my voice was done. I was out of breath, and this is the only like other time other than chapter 16 on the album that I freaking broke down. Um, I finished singing "Won't You Dine with Me" that second time, end of album right there, and I just like slumped over and just started weeping, um, because of her. Um, like that's why I kept, like the original take of that, because like I freaking sang that, like screamed that, then sang that in, and just started weeping right after I finished, just weeping. And so, like, yeah, this song means a lot to me because of that. Um, because, like, that was emotionally real. That was, like, how I felt. And just being consumed with that emotion and just sadness, because when you really love somebody and then they're just gone for whatever reason, not to like compare her with Gomer or whatever, because that's not my place, and I don't think it is that way anyway. But all I'm saying is like when somebody is like completely severed from you, like it's it's hard not to feel that way, and I don't know. I think that counts for something, and can give us perspective of like the way Jesus, I guess, longs for us. At least that's how I believe it. But so yeah, that's the end of chapter 20, and thus the end of volume 1. Uh, hopefully you've made it this far. Um, all I can say that from here, um, there is going to be a volume 2. I'm currently working on it. Um, my plan is, it's early March right now. I'm going to have volume 2 ready by the end of June. Now, I don't know how many songs it's going to be. It's definitely not going to be 20. I, I can't do 20 songs ever again alone. Sorry, it's too much. Um, I'm glad that I finished volume 1, but sorry, like I can't do that much at one time, unless if I completely half-ass it. But I'm not gonna do that. Um, it's going to be volume two is going to be a minimum of 4 songs, and I think right now it'll be more, and that's because I've already completed, as of like a few hours ago, actually, 3 drum tracks for volume four, and that's with only like working on it, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks or so, which is crazy to me because yeah, it would have taken me like 4 times longer, um, or at least seemed like it, um, before. Like this time last year, like I couldn't do it as quickly, but I can do it now because I actually know what I'm doing now, um, and know how to do it more effectively and easier. So yeah, like completely writing and basically finishing 3 songs just doing drums like in a few weeks is very feasible from now on. So I think I started the fourth one, like right after that. I had some extra time on my hands, so the fourth one will take maybe a full week, maybe a week and a half. Which once I finish that, like hopefully by like next week, I'll be way ahead of like my schedule that I wanted to. So I'll just make it 5 or 6, maybe even 7 songs. It'll be between 4 and 7 songs. I'm not gonna go beyond that, but that's for like a June release. By the end of the year, December or so, it'll be like another EP, probably 3 songs, I'm thinking. So yeah, uh, volume two in a few months from now, volume three by the end of the year. And mind you, I've already written these songs. I've already recorded most of it too, other than like drums. But once I redo drums, then hey, I'm going to go back and re record guitars, vocals, bass, all that stuff. But I'm not writing this stuff from scratch. I've already got like everything kind of locked in. It's just, it's about making it better and making sure everything's on time and that like the vocal takes are, at least up to a better standard than maybe some of the vocal takes on volume one. Um, but yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and be on the lookout for new music in a few months.